around though, so temperatures holding up into the mid-teens for most of us. So a fairly mild start to the day on Tuesday, but a pretty damp one for some of us, particularly where this heavy rain lingers, where that warning is still in force. However, for western areas of Scotland, it will likely be a bright start to the day, away from the far Northern Isles where some showers will move in. And across southwestern areas of Scotland, again, some brightness, dry for Northern Ireland, but this heavy rain will likely be affecting northern areas of England, North Wales and potentially into the Midlands and the southwest as well. Still quite a lot of cloud around across the southeast too, and that rain's going to continue to pivot around and slowly clear away to the North Sea through Tuesday morning. We're also going to see some heavy showers break out across central areas of Scotland, northern England too, where there is a rain warning in force through much of Tuesday. But from the west, it will turn much drier and brighter as the day goes on Tuesday. So some brightness coming through, not feeling too bad in the sunshine. Temperatures in the high teens, low 20s at best. And as we head into Wednesday, that's more settled weather becomes more widespread. So Wednesday is looking like a fine day for many of us. We could see the odd shower breaking out here and there, but for most of us, it should be dry and bright, and actually also feeling quite a bit warmer. Highs of around 25 degrees are expected on Wednesday across the south, potentially up to 26 degrees on Thursday. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Still really slow heading south down the M6 through the West Midlands as you come off the M54 after a lorry broke down between the Wolverhampton and Wednesbury exits, junction 10 to 9. All restrictions have been lifted, but it's also really heavy the other way back to the M5 due to onlookers slowing down. In Northamptonshire, northeast of Frapston, a serious accident closes the A605 through Titchmarsh. And in central London, the Waterloo Bridge has been shut northbound. A bus has broken down, leaving a number of buses having to diverge. All the surrounding routes are gridlocked. In Berkshire, to the west of Newbury, just off the A34, the A4 Bath Road, blocked by a police investigation. And it's really heavy out of England into Wales on the M4 westbound. One lane still closed over the Prince of Wales Bridge at the scene of an accident. And southern trains are suspended. Shepherd's Bush to Watford Junction, overhead line problems. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
A very good evening to you and welcome to GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Well, this was the moment that has shaken the world.
Take a look at what happened.
Astonishing scenes, and we'll get full reaction from America on the fallout from President Donald Trump being shot as an assassination attempt narrowly went wrong. Elsewhere, we'll discuss the record population increase, which has been blamed on mass immigration. And of course, we cannot discuss England's devastating Euro 2024 loss to Spain last night. We'll be joined by a former international and Premier League footballer. And we'll also find out from a tech expert how AI could help tackle children skipping school. What do you reckon about that? We'll get in touch with your thoughts the usual ways on tonight's topics by going to gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's your news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
And the top story tonight on GB News, Americans are gathering in Wisconsin in the United States for the Republican National Convention, which kicks off tonight as Donald Trump is set to formally announce his intention to run for president. Let's show you live pictures from outside that convention hall in Milwaukee in Wisconsin, where we've also seen hundreds of anti-Trump demonstrators gathering despite that assassination attempt on Donald Trump at the weekend. He is due to reveal inside the building his vice presidential running mate, and on Thursday we know he'll make a keynote speech. Earlier on, His Majesty the King sent well wishes to Donald Trump as well. Buckingham Palace not giving us the details of the exact nature of that correspondence, but it is understood to have condemned the violence and wished the former president a speedy recovery inside the Republican National Convention Centre tonight. 50,000 people expected to gather for the party naming him as president on the presidential ticket, and of course the big reveal of the vice presidential candidate for tonight. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's classified documents case has been thrown out of court today. A Florida judge made the decision after finding the prosecutor had unlawfully been appointed. Donald Trump says all other cases against him should now be quickly dismissed, but the decision is likely to be appealed. News here in the UK, and a man charged with murder after human remains were found in 2 suitcases on a bridge in Bristol has been remanded in custody. Justine Andres Mosquera is accused of killing 62-year-old Albert Alfonso and 71-year-old Paul Longworth. Police say he'd stayed with them in their flat in London, where more remains were found. Over 1,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel since Labour came to power. GB News can reveal the total number of migrants to make the journey in small boats since the general election stands at 1,128. It's understood to be a slight improvement in the weather conditions, which saw almost 250 arrivals over the previous 4 days. The arrivals take the number of migrants who've crossed the English Channel to 14,702 so far this year. And one last story to update you on events in Dublin. Police have been clashing with anti-immigration protesters there. A number of people were arrested after police and fire service personnel came under attack at a site that's due to be developed to house asylum seekers. A makeshift protest camp had been set up several months ago to prevent workers from entering the area and starting that conversion. Ireland's Justice Minister says she's appalled by the scenes. That's the news at 7 o'clock. I'm back at 8. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now, good evening. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GBN Tonight. Now, before we get into today's big stories, some important news that I expect you've been waiting tentatively to hear for some weeks now, and it's this. Nigel Farage is back. Yes, tomorrow, the man whose seat I'm sitting in right now is returning to host his show. He'll be back live and exclusively on GB News from 7 p.m. tomorrow. And here's what he had to say last week.
I am coming back to GB News, and I'll be broadcasting on Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m, and it starts next Tuesday. And, you know, I've been with GB News continuously for 3 years. I've said very publicly that it's the best job I've ever had. I've loved doing it, so I can't wait to get started again.
So brace yourselves for the return of the big man. Until then, I'm afraid you've got me keeping the seat warm. I'm sure we're very excited to hear what Nigel has to say. Now he's an MP, 8th time lucky. The fox is in the hen house, he said. Well, tomorrow he'll be back on GB News. Well, it was a shocking moment which has sent reverberations across the entire world. Former US President Donald Trump was shot through the ear in an attempted assassination that wasn't, mercifully, quite successful. The alleged shooter was 20-year-old Pennsylvania resident Thomas Matthew Crooks. The motive is not yet known. He was shot dead by the Secret Service at the scene. And not so fortunate were the one person in the crowd who was killed and the 2 others who were wounded. Now, since the attack, the former US president has since said in an interview, "I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be dead." Let's take a look now at the incredible moment when Donald Trump literally dodged death.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Well, it's still surreal to believe that Donald Trump came that close to death. And that image of him pumping his fist in the air and shouting, "Fight, fight, fight," against the backdrop of that US flag will surely go down as one of the most historic images in political history. Now, here's how President Biden reacted.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence, or for any violence ever. Period. No exceptions. We can't allow this violence to be normalized. You know, the political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. Disagreement is inevitable in American democracy. It's part of human nature. But politics must never be a literal battlefield, and God forbid, a killing field.
Well, let's call for calm, said Joe Biden. Well, last week he said, let's put a bullseye on Donald Trump. Well, that call for unity may well fall on deaf ears if these reactions from some on the left are anything to go by.
You don't miss those! One shot at greatness to be mentioned in the history books! And you missed the shot!
I haven't even had a second to process. You're telling me somebody finally had the balls to bring a pew-pew, and he missed! We were a second away! We were a centimeter away from half of the problem being gone, and you missed!
I'm not saying that I would ever try to assassinate a presidential candidate. All I'm saying is that if I went through all of that trouble, I wouldn't miss.
Isn't it astonishing? Trump derangement syndrome doesn't even have a day off on the day when they tried to kill Donald Trump. What's wrong with these people? Some weird brain virus. They're the ones, remember, who say that people on the political right are the problem. These are the Be Kind Brigade. Well, there's no kindness on offer anywhere in sight. And Jack Black, remember him? Yeah, the guy from School of Rock. Well, he had this classy response to the news that a former president had nearly been shot dead and murdered in front of the entire world.
Don't miss Trump next time.
Now, can you imagine if the roles were reversed? Can you imagine if anybody from the political right was glorifying the fact that an attempted assassination on Joe Biden or anybody else from that political side of the spectrum went wrong? Next time, make sure you get the guy. It's an astonishing display of how hateful that side of the political spectrum has become. And just to mention that happening right now is the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where Donald Trump is expected to announce his vice president choice in the coming days. And meanwhile, outside the convention is an anti-Trump protest. The coalition to march on the RNC, you can see that all there on your screen in Milwaukee. And there are, of course, Palestine flags, the ubiquitous flag of the Caring, Sharing Brigade. Seriously, why don't these people have a day off on Saturday? Donald Trump was almost assassinated on live television in front of the world, and they still think a good use of their time is to fly the Palestine flag of peace and call for Trump to stand down. It's just astonishing how polarised politics has become in America. Even this attempted assassination hasn't been a wake-up call to these people. It's incredible. And joining me now to discuss this is the former Trump campaign deputy chairman, Rick Gates. Rick, welcome to the show. Incredible scenes on our screens there. Even 2 days after the attempted assassination, they're still out there. They are still waving their flags. How on earth did America become so polarised? Because you'd have thought that this attempted assassination might make them think, do you know what? We should take a day off. That hasn't happened.
It's great to be with you this evening, and it truly is astonishing to see the polarization in our country. Our country is truly divided when it comes to political parties, and I don't think that you're going to see, any healing in that, as you demonstrated from some of the videos. These people are radical. They want to create violence, which there is just absolutely no place in politics for that. But hopefully these protests that you see outside the Republican convention, the Democrats will have theirs in a couple of weeks, and you will have protests there inevitably. Hopefully those will be peaceful protests. But at the end of the day, the two candidates, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, have an opportunity through all of these different events to potentially unite our country.
And how do you think this will affect the electorate? I mean, we saw, for example, in 1981, with the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan saw an 8% boost in his polling. People don't like, rightly so, they don't like people being put in these sort of situations. And do you think actually the hateful words of the people we saw on our screens a moment ago, including Jack Black, the total lack of empathy or soul they have, will this further galvanise, do you think, the moderates? Certainly it will the pro-Trump MAGA hardcore voter, but the moderate people watching on, they must be horrified by this.
It'll do two things. It'll galvanize Trump's base, and you will see a lot of people in the rural areas, other areas, come out to vote in droves. And then the moderates and independents, I've always said, are the key to this race. I think they will be moved by this. The Democrats have always said, hey, we're not the party of violence. But yet then you see this demonstration where they attempt to kill one of the presidential candidates on the right. So you're going to see the moderates and independents, I believe, sway toward Donald Trump in the end.
And Rick, how phony do you think it is when we see Bill Gates calling for calm, saying politics shouldn't be a killing field? The same Joe Biden who last week said, let's put Trump in a bullseye.
Yeah, actions speak louder than words. And until Joe Biden is getting a free pass on this because he's got his own issues with being kicked out of the presidency and his nomination, this has given the media something else to focus on. But at the end, Joe Biden, other Democrats, they've got to control the people in their party. They've got to be the ones to step up and say, enough is enough. We need to be united. We need to be calm. We can't have this type of action in our political system. There's no place for it. So we shouldn't have tolerance for it.
And Rick, today we've heard from Donald Trump. He said he's going to tear his speech up. The speech that he got planned, he said it was a humdinger. No doubt it was going to be quite a combative speech towards Joe Biden. Do you think that the near brush with death, he talks about how it's a miracle he's alive. I'm supposed to be dead. The doctor at the hospital said he'd never seen anything like this. Had I not turned my head in that moment, we would not be talking today, would we? Do you think this near brush with death might make Donald Trump more contemplative? Might he soften his tone, or do you think he'll soon be back to business as usual?
So I don't know if he'll soften the tone, but I think that he is certainly contemplative about what could have happened. And he has said, God alone saved me. And you see his type of action behavior, it has to have an impact on him. Any human, it would have an impact on. So I think that it will be reflected in his speech tonight. And he is absolutely happy that he is still alive and to be able to give that speech tonight. And I think that'll motivate him to be able to communicate to his people what they should need, what they should do moving forward, what our country should do moving forward. I think you're going to see a different vision, slightly different vision from him tonight when he makes his speech.
And Rick, another astonishing development today, the Trump classified documents case has been thrown out of court, and that surely will also boost Donald Trump's chances of re-election.
Yeah, out of all the cases that he has been plagued with, this is by far the one that we always said had the most teeth from a legal point of view. This is absolutely an astonishing development for him, a positive development. for somebody to be under 4, major court cases, and now in essence 2 of them are gone, 3 of them are gone. This is a huge win for Donald Trump, a big slap to the special prosecutor in this case, and I think that you're going to see a potential appeal. Absolutely, the prosecutors will appeal this because they want to try to take down Donald Trump in any way they can. And this one actually had some teeth to it, and so now that it's gone, I think it'll be very, very good for Donald Trump as we move forward. It won't impact the election at all at this stage.
And they haven't been able to stop Donald Trump via impeachment. They haven't been able to stop Donald Trump via the courts. They haven't even been able to stop Donald Trump, God willing, through an attempted assassination. Rick Gates, do you think now there's a feeling that Donald Trump is almost a Terminator, a superstar, somebody who cannot be stopped?
Look, I think a lot of people recognize that he has always been a symbol of strength and determination, and even Democrats will say that. And just that, those iconic pictures that will be historical in their place in the political world, the fist pump, as soon as he's shot, when he gets up, all of those resonate with Americans. And you see what's going on the world stage. I think that will absolutely have a positive impact, again, on those key moderates and independents. They're going to be the ones that decide the next president in our country. I think they see the strength and determination of Donald Trump, and they like it.
And Rick Gates, Donald Trump's team have already turned those images into campaign fundraising T-shirts and merchandise. I guess you'd expect no less. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, former Trump campaign deputy chairman Rick Gates. Thank you for your company. Now, coming up, I'll be talking to Democratic strategist Hank Scheinkopf as President Biden calls for unity. But will that fall on deaf ears? Is the US simply too divided?
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm joined now by Stefan Kyriasis to give us the latest on everything theatre.
So, yeah, we're going in first with Starlight Express, which is back. It's not in the West End. It's out at Wembley at the Troubadour Theatre, which is a big, almost kind of warehouse space, which suits because, as you know, have you seen the show?
Starlight Express was my first ever musical. I must have been about 7 or 8 years old. I only saw it once, but I remember it being magical.
Well, this one, it's 1984 it started, and it's still running in Bochum in Germany in a huge arena. So basically what we've got, they've slightly tweaked it, and it's a little boy or little girl, depending on the cast, going to bed, obsessed with toy trains and dreaming of trains. Everybody is dressed up. To me, it looks like a cross between Tron and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. I don't really think any of them look remotely like a train, but hey, the songs are Andrew Lloyd Webber. It's pop mixed with kind of cod 1950s rock and roll, some power ballads. The lyrics are politely like something out of an old speak and spell machine or something. You know, he's a steam train, they're out of date, he's being bullied by the diesel and the electric, and he falls for this carriage, the first-class carriage, new girl Pearl, and he wants to impress us, who enters a race, and that's pretty much it. And when the races happen, all these barriers come up around where we're sitting, the lights are flashing, the music's thumping. It's utterly ridiculous, and I felt like a kind of teenager that was huffing sherbet dib-dabs off a giant block of sugar. It's so much fun, and the really crucial thing about it all is that somehow, in the middle of all of that, I felt myself getting into the story. And when Pearl and Rusty have their little duet, I was very moved. And there's this big starlight sequence, which is the inspiration, the magical starlight that he's seeking. It's beautiful.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight. I'm Martin Daubney. Now, we're still talking about the shocking assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump and the Democrats' response. And last night, President Joe Biden called for unity in an Oval Office address. But is it too little, too late? Well, I'm now joined by Democratic strategist Hank Scheinkopf, live from New York. Hank, thank you for joining us on the show. So a call for unity from President Joe Biden saying we cannot allow this violence to be normalised. Politics must never be a literal battlefield. And yet last week, Hank, the same Joe Biden was saying it's time to put Trump in a bullseye.
Well, you know, look, Americans engage in crazy behavior. If you look at the assassinations over the years or assassination attempts, there's always a call for people to calm down, and then you wait a few weeks and people go back to being Americans, which they want to kind of politics here is kind of it's a good way to say it. It's a slam in tennis every moment, and it doesn't change.
But we've seen a variety of reactions from people on social media, from Jack Black, and it has to be said that there's very, very little sympathy, or the milk of human kindness from the Democratic side of the political divide seems to have turned very sour, even millimetres from death. There seems to be very, very little sympathy towards Donald Trump. How did American politics become so hatefully polarised?
It became hatefully polarised because both parties have moved in kind of directions that weren't expected. They moved to the extremes, the Democrats to the left, the Republicans to the right, with no center, the death of civic culture. People don't talk to each other anymore in settings that aren't political. The end result is a divided America with no way back.
Well, we hope there is a way back. Do you think that there is no way back? That's a strong thing to say.
I think it's going to be very difficult, very, very difficult to have unity. If you look at previous assassination attempts, when Gerald Ford was the president, there were 3 attempts to kill him. People made jokes about him on television. Ronald Reagan, people were calm for a little bit. The Kennedys, people were stunned. But we've gone past that now. We're somehow in a land where human pain is less important than winning elections, where the permanent political government, or what I call the political industrial complex, dominates our discussions rather than any sense of what we need to do as a people.
Do you think there's more to it than that, though? Do you think there's something more sinister about the fact that, particularly, there's a feeling that Donald Trump almost deserves this? He's been so othered. He's been compared to Adolf Hitler. He's been called a Nazi, a white supremacist, a KKK sympathiser. This has gone on for so long and with such a depth now to it that he's almost become completely dehumanised by those on the liberal left in America.
They've done it to Joe Biden, too, since his gaffes at the debate. It's
but nobody's
almost
trying
like
to assassinate Joe Biden.
We don't know the number of assassination threats that the Secret Services had to vet or go through. This attempt to kill Donald Trump has real ramifications for the political system. The people that he represents are those who believe they've been left out of the American dream, that they're not going to be part of it again. They look and they see America that is changing rapidly, where very few, less than 50%, can now trace their roots to Europe. It's a very changed country, and people are feeling very threatened by it.
And what do you think this means for the Democratic Party, for Joe Biden? Just last week, the entire conversation was about we need to remove Joe Biden, his biggest supporters, donors withholding tens of millions of dollars. And now it seems that the Democrats are stuck with Joe Biden. After this event, surely there's no way they will attempt to replace him.
There's no way they could replace him anyway. Most states have already created their ballots. You know, there's something to be said, and I think in the UK it's well understood that when you upset the way parties function, you tend to upset how democracy functions, and you don't take those risks. We've seen in Europe particularly what it means when you do that. And the last time you saw it in such a way as it occurred in Germany, nearly 100 million people were killed. You can't fool with democracy, because when you do, you create a tremor that you cannot control.
But if democracy is enacted, it looks most likely now that Donald Trump is nailed on to be the next president of the United States of America. This latest assassination attempt will most likely bolster him in the polls. It did the same with Ronald Reagan. People don't like the fact that somebody seems they should be assassinated. If democracy is enacted, if Donald Trump is voted in as the next president of the USA on November the 5th, do you think that that will be accepted by the liberal left?
It doesn't matter whether they accept it or not. The extraordinary thing about a constitutional system is they're going to have to tolerate it. And so will Donald Trump have to come to some kind of compromise.
To your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Heavy rain will continue in central areas overnight with rain warnings in force. But for many of us, it is going to be a mild night. We've got southwesterly winds as low pressure has been approaching from the southwest, and band of rain is pivoting around this area of low pressure, bringing some very heavy rain to central areas of England, parts of Wales as well, where there's a rain warning in force until the early hours of Tuesday. We could see some localised flooding by tomorrow morning. Further north, it will remain largely dry overnight. There's quite a lot of cloud around though, so temperatures holding up into the mid-teens for most of us. So a fairly mild start to the day on Tuesday, but a pretty damp one for some of us, particularly where this heavy rain lingers, where that warning is still in force. However, for western areas of Scotland, it will likely be a bright start to the day, away from the far Northern Isles where some showers will move in. And across southwestern areas of Scotland, again, some brightness, dry for Northern Ireland, but this heavy rain will likely be affecting northern areas of England, North Wales, and potentially into the Midlands and the southwest as well. Still quite a lot of cloud around across the southeast too, and that rain's going to continue to pivot around and slowly clear away to the North Sea through Tuesday morning. We're also going to see some heavy showers break out across central areas of Scotland, northern England too, where there is a rain warning in force through much of Tuesday. But from the west, it will turn much drier and brighter as the day goes on Tuesday. So some brightness coming through, not feeling too bad in the sunshine. Temperatures in the high teens, low 20s at best. And as we head into Wednesday, that's more settled weather becomes more widespread. So Wednesday is looking like a fine day for many of us. We could see the odd shower breaking out here and there, but for most of us, it should be dry and bright, and actually also feeling quite a bit warmer. Highs of around 25 degrees are expected on Wednesday across the south, potentially up to 26 degrees on Thursday. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight. I'm Martin Daubney. Now, hope and glory dashed by a dominant Spanish side. Try as they might, England once again failed to do enough to lift a major trophy as they were defeated in the final of the 2024 European Championship. Now, as the hangovers start to ease slightly and the dust settles, questions now, of course, turn to the future of England's team and if Gareth Southgate is the right man to lead it. Well, our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, joins me now from my home city of Nottingham. Will, what do the people in Nottingham think?
Yes, well, Martin, an Englishman can pray for summer and he'll be given rain. An Englishman can pray for a trophy and he'll come back empty-handed. There is nothing we can do about that. And many people think that that problem rests solely at the door of the manager, Gareth Southgate. We're in Nottingham, a city famed for its football and its football managers, but I would say that it's pretty split. A lot of people really happy with how far Gareth Southgate has gotten the England team since he took over in 2016. 4 major tournaments, 2 World Cups with semi-finals and quarter-finals, 2 back-to-back European finals. The Euros has been watched by 23 million people. It's brought in £3 billion into the economy. But ultimately what happens here in Britain cannot have any effect on the pitch. I've been asking people what do they think should happen now to Gareth Southgate at the end of this tournament?
I think you should let him run. Yeah, let him keep going. You know, he's done nothing wrong and he's a good guy.
He's kept everything the same for a long time and
I think we needed a change to win something.
I'm glad Spain won. There was a better team. And England, they need to try harder. Do some more training sessions.
I think he should stay. Yeah, he did well. He got them to where they were. He did brilliant.
I'm proud of Southgate. I think he's a great man. Is he a great manager? I'm not sure he is. We all wanted him to do well because I like him. But nice guys don't always win.
Martin, just over my shoulder is a statue dedicated to Brian Clough, the famous Forest manager. England managerial presence eluded that particular manager, but we know that it's described as the impossible job because of the difficulty. 60 million people back here in Britain criticising that particular job and the role that the manager plays on foreign soils. But we know that Gareth Southgate's contract ends at the end of this year, but the FA, although they haven't said it publicly, are quite keen for him to stay on.
Well, Will Hollis, I know that Market Square like the back of my hand. It's great to see the biggest St George's flag in all of Britain still flying there outside the council house, and that statue of Clough, you may have kissed it many times before. The greatest England manager that the team never had. Will Hollis, thanks for joining us live from Nottingham. And we're joined now by Danny Mills, who's, of course, a former England international. Danny, welcome to the show. So it's the morning after the night before. The dust is settling. The post-mortem begins. A lot of criticism about Gareth Southgate during the tournament, especially early on. Some of the football was absolutely tortuous. And yet, we got to the final, 2 times unlucky. The big question now is, should he stay or should he go? What's your take?
I think he has the right to stay on if he chooses to. That may not be popular, but you have to look around and who's going to replace him. Gareth is the most successful manager by some time. I was maybe part of the golden generation or the golden plated generation because we never won anything. Sven-Goran Eriksson was too quiet, played 4-4-2. Fabio Capello banned ketchup. Steve McLaren was the Wally with the brolly. All these things, all these managers haven't succeeded. Kevin Keegan before that, great people, great club managers in their own right, never quite did it for England. I keep hearing all this about, Gareth's lost 2 finals in a row. He's also got to 2 European finals in a row. That's some achievement. We have no divine right to go and win tournaments. Yes, we've got a good squad, but so have Spain. France had a good squad. Germany had a good squad. They'll all be very, very disappointed that they haven't won it. I think Didier Deschamps will stay on as French manager. I think it looks like Nagelsmann will stay on as German manager. We are desperate to get rid of our manager who's just got us to a final. And I just don't get it, because who's going to come in to replace him?
A lot of people, though, would say, Danny, that we had the players and perhaps they'd have got to this final irrespective of if Gareth Southgate had been the manager or not. They've got the talent, they've got the ability, they proved that.
So why didn't they perform then? If they'd have got there irrespective of Gareth, why didn't they perform better? Did Sven-Goran Eriksson make me a better player? No, he didn't. Did he make Rio Ferdinand, Sol Campbell, Ashley Cole? Did he make them, David Beckham, Paul Scholes, better players? No, not in the slightest. He managed the people, and we went out there and we performed. I didn't perform any worse or any better because of Sven-Goran Eriksson. I performed for myself and my teammates. I took the responsibility by myself to go out and perform. Too many of our players did not perform on the biggest stage. Harry Kane wasn't at his best for whatever reason. Jude Bellingham wasn't at his best. Phil Foden wasn't at his best. Declan Rice was okay, but we've seen him play better. Saka in spells was okay. So a lot of these players have been sensational this season, and they showed it in the first half against the Netherlands. So why didn't they go out and do that again? Giving the ball away, that's not to do with the manager. That's to do with their own choices and their own ability. You can't lay everything on Gareth's doorstep.
OK, well, let's just quickly cut now, Danny Mills, to some pictures we have on our screen, because there's a victory parade in Spain. This is the picture. Oh, look at that. Absolute scenes there in Madrid. You cannot move. Thousands and thousands of people packed the central square of Madrid. The Spanish team doing a lap of honour. Those are the sort of scenes, Danny Mills, that bring a tear to the eye, because we should have been seeing those, perhaps, at Trafalgar Square. But Danny, you're very, very insistent here. Don't blame the gaffer, blame the boys on the pitch.
Everybody's accountable for this. You know, Gareth seems to be carrying the can for all this. But realistically, can all those players come out and say they performed to the best of their ability? There are a few in there. Jordan Pickford, I thought, had a decent tournament. John Stones, Mark Gahey, I thought, was very, very good. Luke Shaw did well when he came in. But a lot of those players did not perform to their maximum potential. And that's not just on the manager. Players have to hold themselves accountable. They have to take some responsibility for that. I think we heard that from Phil Foden after 3 games of the tournament. Gareth was asking him to play maybe a slightly different way, and they weren't able to fulfil that. So, look, the next England manager, if he's going to be better than Gareth, has to win the World Cup. If not, he's failed. Simple as that. That's how everyone's looking at it at the moment. Because Gareth's failed getting to 2 finals. So unless we win the next World Cup, the next manager will also fail. It's big, difficult shoes to fill.
It certainly is. And if we do win that World Cup, it'll be 60 years without a trophy. That one we could put the sword through. So who do you think might take over? I mean, ultimately, of course, Danny Mills, this may well be Gareth Southgate's decision himself. He probably might say, do you know what, I'm going to bow out now. Now is the time. Now, the bookies have got Graham Potter as the favourite. Who would you like to see as an ex-England gaffer if it was down to you, Dan?
Well, I think Gareth would have the right to walk away, and I wouldn't blame him, because I think even if we'd have won this tournament, there'd have been criticism about how we won it. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. People are talking about Graham Potter. Did OK at Brighton, went to a big club at Chelsea, didn't perform. For whatever reason, couldn't handle the personalities, couldn't handle the pressure, the media, whatever. Was poor when he went to Chelsea. Eddie Howe's been mentioned within that. OK, Eddie's done great at Bournemouth coming through. Had a first fantastic season at Newcastle, but last season was a huge drop-off. Lee Carsley, under-21 manager, has been mentioned. Again, it's a huge step up, you know, to make that leap. So I'm not sure. I don't think that there is no outstanding candidate. Jurgen Klopp, Julian Nagelsmann, Pep Guardiola are not going to take this job. Carlo Ancelotti is not going to. They are not going to take the England job, because they know the only way to be successful is to win the next World Cup. And with all the other teams, obviously, that come into it, not just in Europe and the rest of the world, Argentina, Brazil, and all the other nations, it's going to be very, very difficult to win that. So be careful what you wish for. Everyone wants to get rid of Gareth Southgate, but I fear that if we do, I'm not sure we make a semi-final of the World Cup.
Now, Danny Mills, final question. Do you think that the England manager should be English? Does that not matter?
Preferably, yes, but I don't think it matters. Hence, Lee Carsley is under-21 manager. I think you find he's Irish, and no one seems to have an issue with that at the moment. So, no, in an ideal world, yes, I think it does help. We've tried foreign managers. It has to be the best candidate for the job and the best person for the job. Look at what the women have done. You know, they got a foreign manager in, and they went on and won the Euros. So I don't think it matters, as long as it's the right person for the job.
Well, Danny Mills, thanks for joining us, giving us your expertise. And I've got to say, you know, well done to Spain, but it does stick in my craw to see that victory parade there in Madrid, knowing what might have been. We'll have to wait at least another 2 years for a sniff of glory. Danny Mills, former England international, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, coming up, as England and Wales record the biggest annual population growth in 75 years, we'll speak to a demographer, Paul Morland, about what that means for the future.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said storm. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Khloe Kardashian has come under fire after posting a picture of her 6-year-old daughter wearing a full face of makeup.
Yeah, the reality TV star said the youngster was participating in a dance recital and that wasn't an everyday occurrence.
So this morning we're asking, is it ever OK to let children wear makeup?
Well, joining us now is journalist Julie Cook. So, Julie, it's a child wearing full rouge, bright red lipstick, hair tied back, looking very, very stylised, very much, I think, like a young adult. Is this really the sort of thing we should be doing with small children?
Oh, I think it's absolutely fine. I mean, first of all, in Khloe Kardashian's case, it was a dance recital, so it was very much a kind of performance element to it. She said herself in her post, it wasn't something they do every day. She was taking part in a dance activity. So, you know, I think she's vindicated on that front. But I've let my daughter play with makeup since she was 3. When she was 3, she showed a distinct interest in my makeup palettes going through my stuff. She's 10 now, and while I don't let her wear a full face like a drag queen, I do let her wear, you know, a bit of mascara on a weekend if she wants to. I don't see any harm in it.
Clearly, if you're a child of a Kardashian who's paid millions of dollars to endorse cosmetics, you know, that's part of the fabric of their family. My concern, though, Julie, is putting those pictures on social media where people can see them. We live in an age now where, you know, wrong-uns are scouring the internet all the time.
A lot of girls do enjoy putting makeup on. It's almost like a self-expression thing. It's like painting on a canvas. They're just trying to be a bit artistic. I don't think it's necessarily as sort of sinister as we're making out. And I think as long as you're not posting pictures everywhere or putting them at risk of harm, I don't see any danger.
The People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight. I'm Martin Daubney. Now, new figures suggest the population of England and Wales saw the biggest annual increase in 75 years, thanks, of course, to high immigration. According to the estimates from the Office for National Statistics, the population soared by almost 610,000 in the year to mid-2023. Well, here to dig into all of this is the demographer Paul Morland. Paul, welcome to the show. The figures are stark, a rise of 610,000, and the population, of course, is bolstered by immigration by 622,000 net. That quite simply says the population is being driven solely by immigration.
Yeah, I think that really is the story. A 1% rise in the annual population of a country is not really a particularly big deal. That's about the global average where we are now. There have been countries where they've seen the population grow 3 or 4% in a year, countries with very high birth rates and falling infant mortality. So it's not the 1% that's striking. It's the fact that we now have the births and deaths in England and Wales almost matching each other, which is probably the first time that this is happening in the UK as a whole, because Scotland has more deaths than births. But it may be the first time we're having almost more deaths than births since the Black Death. It's very unnatural. But now it's becoming very globally normal, because in more and more countries, people are having so few children. And people, of course, living longer. And the net effect is we've got lots of elderly people, and we have a reasonable number of deaths. Even if they're living longer, death comes eventually, but the number of births is plummeting. And we're now where Germany is, China, Russia, Japan, big countries, which have every year more deaths than they have births.
Yeah, and I think, Paul Morland, there are some figures out tomorrow, which I'm going to cover on my show, which shows that this is a universal pattern across all of the European Union member states. Immigration now the sole driver, as well, of course, movement within the European Union from countries that have less opportunity to those that have more. That's a double whammy. Mercifully, we've been spared since Brexit. But let's get back to the regional differences from within the United Kingdom. There are some fascinating discrepancies. Rural areas dying out at a much greater rate. The areas with the highest birth rates, major cities, London, the West Midlands and Paul Morland, that carries with it a significant cultural change, doesn't it?
Well, of course, immigration, which we haven't yet talked about, which is actually the factor that determines the growth now. If births roughly equal deaths, then it's all about migration. And migration, inevitably, is overwhelmingly into the cities. In Britain, it always has been. There are exceptions, like in America, Norwegians went out to farm in the Midwest. But essentially, immigration is an urban phenomenon. So if we are not growing our population as a whole in terms of births and deaths, but we are having growth in terms of immigration, and that immigration is predominantly going to our cities, that means it's the cities which are relatively growing and the countryside which is relatively declining. And of course, wherever that 500,000 to 600,000 immigrants go every year within the country, it means that the ethnic composition of the country is changing very rapidly.
And it's true to say that immigrants of all colours throughout history have had more children, same when the Irish went to New York, the Germans and so on and so forth. But what we see then is an inexorable change of the landscape of how our towns and particularly our cities look. But Paul Morland, if we're having so few children, how do we encourage people to have more kids?
Well, I just want to say a quick word, if I may, about immigrant birth rates. They tend to fall very rapidly. Every evidence we have suggests that Hindu and Sikh birth rates are no higher than those of the white British population. The Afro-Caribbean population was the only minority group that actually reduced in size at the last census. Muslim birth rates are higher, but they tend to fall. In the US, we've seen Latino birth rates plummet, which is why the overall... So immigrant birth rates will fall towards the national average. What's really driving the ethnic change is not so much the differential birth rate as the sheer scale of immigration. Now, what do we do about it? Well, I wrote a book that came out last week called No One Left, Why the World Needs More Children. It's a global problem. It has local differences. In Britain, I think there are a whole range of things we could do. It's about the government, it's about the public actually rising to the challenge, realizing that if we don't replace ourselves, our country will either be depopulated or populated by other people. And just a couple of very small suggestions. We could teach our youngsters at school how quickly in your 30s fertility declines, your ability to have children, biological fertility declines. That might mean that they model their lives somewhat differently. We could lift the cap on child benefit for 2 children. We could change the tax rates, meaning that people pay lower taxes if they have kids, and if that has to be funded by people who don't have kids, having a higher tax rate, they will benefit from the workforce of the future when they're retired. But the key thing is there's a limit to what the government can do. It really is ultimately about people's priorities and choices.
Paul Morland, fascinating, sir. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us here on the show. Thank you very much. Now, finally, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is turning to artificial intelligence in a crackdown on children bunking off school. According to new reports, the King's speech would include plans for a truancy register, which tracks absent people's whereabouts using AI. Is this a good idea? Can it possibly work? Well, joining me now to discuss just that is the Head of Digital Learning at the University of Surrey, Dr. Chris Trace. What a name, Dr. Trace, talking about tracing children. We know that kids have had record amounts of truancy since lockdowns. They got into bad habits, particularly the most disadvantaged, many of whom never went back. I think around about 100,000, Dr. Trace, never made it back. Is AI the answer?
So thank you for having me. It certainly could be part of the answer. So the way that I think AI may be used in this instance is not Big Brother, it's not ChatGPT either. It's likely to be artificial intelligence in a form that we'd know as machine learning or deep learning. What I've seen, the proposals, it looks like there's a plan really to track this information and then use artificial intelligence to delve into that really big data to try to find the patterns and the inconsistencies.
But isn't this down to the fact that lockdown set bad templates? The government owned that. The Labour Party wanted sooner, harder, longer lockdowns. This kind of happened at their own hand. And now technology is expected to pick up the mess. And call me a cynic, Dr. Trace, but isn't this precisely what Tony Blair would like? He'd love to be in charge of an AI system that tracked and traced every child in Britain.
I can call you a cynic if you like. It could well be. I think AI is not the answer to everything. It's very easy to try to imagine it as a silver bullet that will just fix any problem. As with any large-scale IT project, which is essentially what this sounds like, there's going to need people factors. We're going to have to change the practices. And there's also real concerns around the use of data and pooling of data in this way. So there'll be some fundamental aspects that would need addressing. I guess as a scientist by training, I'm skeptically optimistic that it should be possible. But just because we can doesn't mean we should.
OK, superb. Thanks for your expertise, Dr. Chris Trace. Thanks for sharing that with us. Now, coming up next, of course, is State of the Nation. Let's have a quick chat with the man in the helm. Jacob Rees-Mogg, what's on your menu?
Well, we're going to be talking about Donald Trump, obviously. It's such an important story. But it's so important that he survived. That had Donald Trump been killed, I think the riots taking place in America now would be appalling because all his supporters would have thought this was the culmination of the effort to stop Trump. The suggestion that he was a threat to democracy and therefore it was legitimate to stop him. And there's an historical context as well, because every time there is an assassination, the people who are behind it say this is to save the republic, to save the nation. That would have been the argument behind the gunman's actions, and thank heavens he didn't succeed. It's so important for global security and for American civil order.
Donald Trump astonishingly said, I'm supposed to be dead. The doctor at the hospital said he never saw anything like this. He called it a miracle. And then Joe Biden calling for calm. The same Joe Biden, though, that last week was saying we need to put Trump in a bullseye. How much of that rhetoric over the years from politicians, from the media, from activists, from celebrities, calling Trump a Nazi, a fascist, comparing him to Hitler, how much is that responsible for this calcification of an action that precipitates itself in an attempted assassination?
I would divide it up. I think saying we're going to put somebody in a bullseye, everyone knows that you're not actually calling for somebody to be put in a bullseye, and politicians do use emotive language. I think the Hitler comparison is always one people shouldn't make, because stopping Hitler would have been a legitimate thing to do. It would have been a morally legitimate thing to do because of his evil. And it's not a comparison that ever, to my mind, holds water in a democratic political context. Now, David Lammy called Brexiteers as bad as Nazis.
He called you that?
He then said, when challenged, that I was worse, or the ERG was worse. That sort of language is very dangerous, very silly language to use, because, as I say, excising Hitler would have been legitimate. There is no democratic politician who is in that category.
Now, we have a quick minute. You were in the studio there about how do we get people to have more children? How do we encourage a family basic policy to try and stop this rot of population decline?
Well, I've done my bit. I've got 6 children with my wife, Helena, and very lucky we are too. I think you do need to look at the way the tax and benefit system actually makes it very expensive to have children. You lose in the benefits and tax system if you have children. And I don't think that's sensible, because then people won't. It's not that they need incentives, it's that people think, oh, I just can't afford to have another child, and therefore they don't.
Do you think the Labour Party have got that kind of policy in them? They seem to be quite happy with the idea of legions of single-parent families.
Well, I think you want to support the family at large, and that helps with truancy and all sorts of things if children are being brought up in a family of 2 parents.
Superb. Jacob Rees-Mogg, straight after this. Now, don't forget, of course, tomorrow at 7 o'clock, he's back. The man himself, Nigel Farage, will be in this seat. You will not want to miss that. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6 p.m. on the Martin Dorman Show. But first, here's your weather with Annie Shuttleworth.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Heavy rain will continue in central areas overnight with rain warnings in force. But for many of us, it is going to be a mild night. We've got southwesterly winds as low pressure has been approaching from the southwest, and band of rain is pivoting around this area of low pressure, bringing some very heavy rain to central areas of England, parts of Wales as well, where there's a rain warning in force until the early hours of Tuesday. We could see some localised flooding by tomorrow morning. Further north, it will remain largely dry overnight. There's quite a lot of cloud around though, so temperatures holding up into the mid-teens for most of us. So a fairly mild start to the day on Tuesday, but a pretty damp one for some of us, particularly where this heavy rain lingers, where that warning is still in force. However, for western areas of Scotland, it will likely be a bright start.